Hi everyone, welcome back to the channel again. So today I'm going to have a look at some of these fans. So what I want these to do is to blow the air off my heater from my first video to circulate some of the heat around the workshop a little bit better, rather than just radiating off the actual fire as it's burning in the corner. So I've got another fan on there at the moment, but it's just not pushing enough air. So I thought I might try and reuse these fans, which are from old plasma TVs, because they used to get fairly hot. So there are a lot of fans in there to keep those cool. So what I'm going to do is test each of these fans, see which ones are the best ones, and put 4 of them into this, and then that'll become the base of a fan arrangement to blow the air past the hot box, and then just push it into the workshop so that I can hopefully stay a little bit warmer during next winter. So first, what I need to do, I've got I've got a battery running off a solar panel and stuff in here. So what I'm going to do is just build a little test jig to hook 12 volts up to, so the battery is just sort of over there somewhere. So I'm just basically going to hook this lead up to it using a couple of little clips, and I'm just going to put some screws into here as a base to hook up 12 volts to. So we'll do that first, and then we'll test the fans, and then we'll build the fan bit. So just get all of those out of the way. So I'm just recycling some old clips from another job at some point or another, where I've had batteries on running with these clips on them at some point. So I just got to desolder those and put the new wires in. Alright, so I'm just going to wait for the soldering iron to warm up. Tin these wires, remove the old wires from this one, and then hook these up, and then that can go over the battery, and then these two wires will go on to the screws that'll go into here, and I might do that while I'm waiting for the soldering iron to warm up. So I'm not going to do anything special or fancy. I'm not going to do anything unless I can find my screwdriver. Alright, so all I'm going to do is just screw these into here. This is really flimsy wood, so I don't expect it to hold it very well, but I just hope it doesn't split. Because all I want it to do is just provide a spot for me to clip onto when I'm doing some work. So that's all I'll need to do there. So I guess I better mark them before I get carried away. Now I'm just going to make sure I actually hook them up that way. I do actually have a 12 volt power supply, but I'm not going to use it. It's an old computer power supply. I'm not going to use that when I've got the batteries here to use. I am planning on trying to run the workshop off the solar and that sort of stuff, but I've just got to replace the inverter because the inverter that I've got isn't strong enough. But that's a video for another day. Alright, so that's the 2 wires tinned up. So now I'll just grab hold of these clips and remove the old wire. And put the next one in. and rinse and repeat with the next one. Oops, I melted the plastic on the cover for the clip. And I didn't get any solder on the actual... There's no solder on the clip. I don't know how that happened. Managed to wipe it all out when I pulled the wire out. Let's try that again. There we go. Alright, so I'm just going to wrap this wire around this particular spot on the screw. Hopefully the screw will take the solder. It's probably one thing I should have tested first before I did that. Alright, so after a bit of thinking and testing, I've decided I'm going to run with a washer. So this washer here, I've just managed to give it a bit of a sand, and the solder's sticking to that quite okay. So I'm going to have two of those. I'm going to drill 2 holes into this piece of wood and basically just pop up 2 bolts into the bottom of it and use that as my sort of battery posts as such that I can clip onto to do the rest of the work, and then I'll just bolt the bolts down. I might just use a slightly different piece of wood though, I think, just to give me some height off the deck for countersinking the holes that I've got to use for the bolts. Alright, so I'm just going to use this piece of pallet wood and make it into basically the same thing I've got there that I can hook the bits up to. So I'll just move all this stuff out of the way because I'll get the drop saw out and just make a short piece of wood here, and then we'll get back into it. Alright, loud noises for a second while we cut a piece of wood. I'll just give it a quick trim just to make the edge hopefully a little bit straighter than it is on there. Alright, now we just vacuum up the mess. I should have hooked the vacuum cleaner up to it. Never mind. Alright, so I've got our piece of wood ready to go. So I'll just grab the bolts that I'm going to use and just countersink a hole into the back of this piece of wood, which is not very flat. I guess we'll come up that way. So just to make sure that I can get a socket onto this, I'm just going to drill a 25mm pilot hole just for the depth of the nut, sorry, the bolt, so that it goes through the hole okay, and so that it's not going to short out if it touches anything on the bench. Probably a bit of overkill. Alright, we'll try and do this slightly properly, so I'll just try and use a square on this just to make sure the holes are going to line up reasonably well, maybe. just hope that the edge of the wood here that I'm using is reasonable. And no, it's not. That's okay. So I'll now just pop the nut hole in here. Sorry, the bolt hole. We'll do more. Now do it again for the other side. There we go. And now I'll just change drill bit and finish the hole with the small one. And more vacuuming. Alright, so those two bolts will go up there quite easily and happily and not touch anything once I can find where I'll put the other one. Alright, I have no idea where I managed to put the other bolt, so I just grabbed another one. And now of course I'll probably find. That's okay. Alright, so I got the two bolts through there. I'll just solder the wires onto here now, and then I can bolt them down, and then we'll be done. Just tin these wires up. Just going to give this one a bit of a squeeze after I managed to do a terrible job of trying to solder it to the screw before. Alright, now we'll pop them onto the washers. One. And that's the second one. That's still hot. Alright, we'll just bolt these down now. Hopefully that's cooled down enough that I'm not going to burn my hands again. There we go. Alright, we'll just use that to hold it. Then I'll use the socket from the outside. That's one done. And that's two. Alright, now just remark it as to what's what. Let's see if this will reach my battery, so I can still show you guys what's going on. Otherwise I'll have to do something different. There we go, 12 volts. That's good, straight out of the battery. So now I can actually get on with what I wanted to do. So one clip there, and one clip here. Alright, now I'll see if I can get some of these fans to spin up for me. Just wondering if I should take them out because those leads are extraordinarily short. Might have to try and put a wire in from behind, I think. So I'm just going to cut the wires off because I'm going to solder them anyway. So rather than boring you all here with my inability to do this, I'll just bypass my inability to do this. Now, for anyone that doesn't know the color codes on these fans, the red and black is obviously just power, and then the yellow is a sensor, so I can tell how fast it's spinning for those that use power control to make the fan speed faster or slower depending on what they're doing. Okay, that one's going okay. It's not noisy, which is the main thing I'm checking for. So I'll just put a tick on that one and move on to the next one. Alright, so rather than testing them all, I've got 4 good ones, so I'm basically going to mount them into this frame. And so rather than testing all of them, I'll just carry on with what I've got. So now I'll just unhook my little test jig. Put that away for next time. Probably in about 10 minutes once I've finished soldering all these wires together and I make them work. So I'll just pull all this apart and give it a bit of a clean up because it's a bit of a mess. I'm not quite sure what's happened there, but it looks like they've got wet at some stage and they've got a bit of surface rust on there. I'll just pull all these cable systems off as well. Well, actually, I might leave them there because that might be a good idea to run my cables through, maybe. I'll just give these a brush off with the toothbrush. I'm not going to worry too much about it, but just to make sure they're okay when I put it back together. Because by the time I'm using it, it's going to be full of wood dust and whatever else it is that I have to make a mess of in here. Just making sure I've got 4 brackets and 4 screws to put it all back together with, and then 15,000 of these little rubber grommets. So for anyone who cares or is interested, I think these fans came out of a Panasonic plasma TV. Either that or it was a Sony, but I've got too many of them for it to be a Sony, because I didn't have that many TVs back in the day when I was doing repairs and stuff. I had more Panasonics. Alright, so the next thing I need to do is figure out how I'm going to just extend all these wires. So I have these wires that I've just found. So I think they'll be alright because it's not drawing a lot of power, so we'll see how these go. If they don't work, then I'll change it to something else. Now I'm just going to need some heat shrink as well. So I think all I'll do is I'll just extend it long enough that it gets to the next fan, so I don't have to run them too long. And I'm using green for my negative because that's what I've got. I can't find a black one. Alright, there's my wires. Now we'll just solder them all up. A bit like a production line doing this. Alright, that's the 4 of those done. Alright, that's the 4 of them lined up. Alright, that's them all soldered up for the first tranche. Now we'll get some heat shrink and shrink those down. Just realised I've been keeping you guys in the dark a little bit. Maybe this brown bench doesn't help. Time for a colour change. Alright, I'll heat shrink now, so I'll just actually melt that heat shrink down. Alright, so they're all done. Maybe not that one. Maybe that one another go. That's a bit better. Alright, now it's time to mount them all back into the bracket. Alright, that's all the brackets, all the fans sitting in there. Time for the brackets to go on next. Clips, clamps, whatever you want to call them. Alright, that's all the fans mounted up. So as I was putting those in, I was just thinking about which way I'm going to run the cables and how I'm going to do this. So I think what I'm going to do is firstly bend this tab up, and this will give me a nice flat bracket to actually mount the fans vertically on, because that's the way I need to mount them. I'll take all these other screws out because I really don't need those sitting there. Now I'm just going to figure out what I'm going to do with the cables. So on second thoughts, what I think I'm going to do is run them all to this central point here between all the fans, because I think it'll just be easier to join them at that point because of all the nature of the different wires I've got going. Join them all here, and then figure out a wire to run them up to where the battery's going to be. I just can't find a wire that's going to do that at the moment. So I guess we just trim all these up and connect them all together. Alright, more soldering time. Alright, now it's time to bring back my little test jig again. And then we'll fire it up and see how they go. Here we go. They're blowing air. You probably can't see that, but they're all spinning up. You can probably see the fan spinning on them. I wonder if I turn off. What happens there? Yep. So all that's going to do is just, as I said, allow me to put this next to the heater and push the air around the little fireplacey spot that I've got there, and just help circulate some of the heat around the room. Alright, so I will just bend this tab back up so that it's flat. There we go. And I've just realised this has actually got, there's 2 holes already here. Well, 3 holes, or 4 including that one. So I've already got a couple of holes here I can use to bolt this down to a, screw it down to a block wood. I do have a very rough as guts piece of wood sitting here that I could probably just use for this very purpose. So I think that'll do just fine as it is. So all I'll do is grab a couple of screws and screw it down. Just thinking I might have to make those holes a bit bigger. So I've just got a couple of nice flathead screws here that'll just hold it down nicely, but I just need to make the holes for the screw a little bit bigger so that I actually go through it. Alright, that's the 2 holes drilled. Even managed to not take too much of a nick out of the fan, which I was expecting to do. So I think that fan's still in the way. Alright, I'll just mount this up and then I'll put that fan back in. Alright, there we go, that's all mounted up. Now I'll just grab the rubber bushings again. Of course, this bushing is deciding to be difficult. There we go. Alright, there we go, one fan tower. So all I've got to do is just grab a lead and I'll solder that up and probably take these up together, and because it's basically got to come up probably a couple of meters long to go into where the 12 volts is going to be, and then I can run that on the heater when I'm cold during the winter. Alright, well that'll do it for this video. Don't forget to drop me a comment down below, and thanks for watching till the end. Don't forget to give it a like and hit that subscribe button for me, and I'll see you in the next one.